Welcome once again to Daybreak Africa. If you're just joining us, it's the best show that you're going to be watching on TV today, actually. And now it's time to discuss, and like I told you earlier, we are going to be discussing something in line with economic development. Now, in the year 2025, Nigeria is set to organize its first population census since 2006, that is in the year 2006, according to the National Population Census Chairman in the person of Nasser Issa Kwara. And today we'll be looking majorly at the population census, the documentation and data, and how it's going to drive economic prosperity and development in Nigeria. To discuss with us today, we have a social commentator, a public affairs analyst with us in the studio in the person of Mr. Kehinde, Emmanuel. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. I've missed being here too, so I'm happy to be here now.
Oh, that's very great, actually. Now, let's delve down straight into the topic. We're talking about the population census. We remember that the last time we had a population census in Nigeria was in the year 2006. Currently, that's 18 years ago. Whereas, according to global practice, most countries, they go about their population census at 10 years, an interval of 10 years, every 10 years. Nigeria, we've had instances, even in 2019, in 2021, where the federal government said we're going to host a population census and all that, which never transpired. But now, 2025, the National Population Census chairman said that we will be having it again in this country. How excited are you about the news? What's your feeling about this particular move?
Okay, so personally for me, I think although we are already far behind, okay, because the United Nations recommendations, all right, from nations countries to see that we do that within 10 years, every 10 years, all right. Data is very, very important. If we are going to go into, let me say, discussion around evidence-based policy making, okay, it's the reason why we even need data, because such that we don't make informed decision based on what we think people want, or what people think, or what we think people want us to do for them. But based on data, we're able to see how we can, based on evidence, gather the information that we need, such that if we are talking about the SRHR, education, even when it comes down to not just the numbers of people, but where are they? All right, so the demographic also can also help us to, it will even help us in all aspects of data. It will help, the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics. It will even help researchers. So it's going to have a very, let me say, the ripple effect will be very quite much, and it's advantageous, all right, for us as a country. I'm super excited, and I also hope that it materializes in 2025.
As it materializes in 2025. You talked about the fact that informed informations to make use of in driving policies and many of those things. Now, that brings me to a question, actually. For 18 years now, we don't have this kind of data available onto us, and yet we have budgets every year talking about the fact that, okay, this year we're going to be having this budget for these particular things and all that, and we just use an estimated figure. Currently, the estimation is we are 250 million as a nation, which we could be lower, we could be way higher, looking at the fact that our birth rate in this country is really grand and all that. Now, will you say that over the years, the fact that we don't have such informed data is why many times, even when we plan out our budgets and all that, it doesn't have much effect on our economy over the years?
I must submit to you that our failure, or let me say the country's inability to gather data, has just helped us to keep chasing shadows. All right, because and that's, I think it's a very bold step, all right, I mean, for this kind of project, because as we have just said earlier, we are all talking estimates. We are not exact. We cannot hold on to that as an authority to say this is our population, right? So when governments, state governments, local governments, so when we are trying to make maybe policies or even to develop a budget framework, all right, we cannot really say this is the number of people to make use of, right? So if you look at data now, it's encompassing. The data will also be instrumental to INEC. It will be instrumental to NIMC, which is our NIN. So if you look at the data from NIN, there's going to be is a different information, because the number of people that they said have come on that their database are just about 100 and something so far. All right. So you look at it that are we really more or are we less than that? But it's going to help. That's why I talk about evidence-based. Evidence-based now, because in policy making, it is important that we make our policies with it must be backed up by evidence. Let me give an instance as regards saying you want to build maybe say a public toilet, for instance. You want to build a public toilet. You don't stop because people are defecating publicly, then you said that's the way to go. All right. So when you do that, you just build. You have not taken time to even gather data as regards that. So you just built the public toilet and realize that after 6 months, nobody is even using this toilet. Then you realize that there's a cultural perception that these people have as regards that public defecation. So maybe they have a belief that there's a particular spirit of God that they worship that has a way of accepting that thing. So now, because you do not have data, you have not done any data research as regards that,
yeah.
so you just think that you can solve problem. So, and I think that the reason why this is instrumental is that so that we would not think that we can just solve problem, because there are many solutions that we think we have, but data helps us to know the kind of solution
that will be very
particular to that particular problem.
Well, since we're speaking about policy making and all of that, how do you think census and getting the proper data would actually help improve our educational sector?
Okay, so let me start with this because I think it's very, very important because I think our focus of this census is more focused on the numbers. So some of us are thinking that it's the numbers that is where people. So when I went through the United Nations policy document, so it is not about how many, all right? It's not just about the how many, because the information that they will be gathered is not just to say this person in this house. They are going to also gather data around their faith, around their gender. So all those information, whether the person is learned, whether the person is employed, so those information will also help us. And interestingly, the chairman of the MPC now, all right, will lay the reference to issue of SRHR. Let me even say that this is also going to be, maybe if it is synchronized with NIMC, it will be able to also help government to trickle down the dividends. All right. So if you want to, let me say, education, as we have said, as you mentioned now, it is going to help us to know the number of people that are out of school.
Okay.
Right. So we have the number of students that are not even in school at all. Those who we think that they can now go into vocational training. It helps It helps whether the state government. The predictability that comes with data is that it is very pivot towards empowering us to get. Towards national development as a country. Whether it is technology, whether it is this, every of those sectors depend on data. They are data dependent, because many of the things we are trying to do is not like we are just walking around, we are just being skeptical, we are just assuming, right? And as such, for instance, if you know there's this U report, right? U-report. Now, U-report also was an attempt to see that people just get questions and say they ask some questions and people just give their response. So when they gather that helps us to know. For instance, based on the report in 2018, the information told us that the reason why many children are out of school is not because they don't want to go to school. It's not even the problem of maybe there are no schools. Okay? The reason is because that the cost of the textbook, the school fees, the uniforms are even really the issue. Not that they cannot go to school. So because the gist is, the Abrahamic theory of needs. Yeah, so definitely. Every child is not about the food. Now, every child gets to school, the child doesn't want to just sit down in class, but they want to also belong, wear uniform, dress like other students.
It's just normal law of acceptability.
Exactly. So that's for them. The parents will like, if I don't have the money to get all these things, then why should you go? So, but other people picked other different options. But then 42% of the respondents said that this is the reason why. So that helps even NGOs to say that then what can we do? Is that why not let us see how we can now put some of these students on scholarships? Why not let us see how we can provide educational materials
for them?
That the ripple effect is that you have saved the parent of that aspect of the stress while they focus on just paying the school fees, and the student gets back to school. That is for those in the north region. Then that one is going to require a bit of a social re-engineering.
Because definitely.
What is peculiar to Ondo State? Because if you come to Ondo State and say why people are not going to school, your reason might likely be different from those in Sokoto. right? And that is why data for us is very important.
Data for us is very important. I think I like that. But then I remember we had this discussion over 2 years ago, when the last time when the NPC said we're going to have a population census. I think that was in 2021. And I remember it was with the former presidential aspirant in the person of Barrister Adewale Adebayo then. And he made a statement. He said, aside from the fact that he made some vital statement about the issue of population census and all that. One of the very vital things he said was the costs of, carrying out the exercise will be a strong, a strong stumbling block to them holding such responsibility of such an event as at that particular time when it comes to going and backing on the program. Then we thought it was maybe just one of those fair things, but then, like he predicted, we did not have the census then due to the fact that many other things came up. Now, talking about this, the staff strengths, the people that are going to be involved with this, do you think as at now, in a time in this country where we are still a bit cash strapped, we can't even fully fund our budget yet? Because according to the statement from the presidency and from the federal government, they said that even the budget we are running for the past 2 years, we are on debt servicing of close to 60%, 90-something% at a time, now reduced to 62% or thereabouts. And just this year, we are just having one of the best ever budgetary years, where we are having a budget close to 45 trillion with just 9 trillion or 13 trillion thereabouts as the deficit. Looking at that, and the country is still looking for a bit of loan from some international organizations to even run some of our infrastructural programs here. Don't you think a backing on the census could be quite expensive at this particular time?
Okay, so census generally across countries is not something that you spend thousands on. Okay, so it's going to cost us money, fact, because the peculiarity of our country also is we have to also consider that tribes, different ethnic groups, different look and crannies, different locations, regions were miles apart. Okay, so it's also required, because the NPC don't even have the staff that can cover all the whole country. So they will need to also bring in, just the way INEC also outsource. So NPC will have to outsource different people. Okay, but where the financing, all right, comes into play, because there are different stages of this whole census processing. Okay, because they will do the mapping and some of those things. The documentation aspect is there. So there are some of the administrative works also that also can even cost more money. But one of the things that I think that I must say, one thing about this administration is that when they are committed to doing it, right, they will want to do it. Okay, so you said it earlier now that the budget servicing, the debt servicing, the ratio has reduced, right, and that's because of some of the reforms that is going on. So, but then, although the budget for this year is still low, okay, compared to what we also should be, because vis-a-vis our population, okay, vis-a-vis our population, and that's why everything is just happening at the same time. Okay, the tax reform bills all are going to play key role in trying to see that we can get a better IGR, right, and see that we can fund some of these things. But then, being that as it may, it's going to cost us money. The number of people the ad hoc staff that will be incorporated into this system, at least for 2006, I know they came to our house in Ibadan then.
Yeah,
okay, definitely. So, but this time around, surely they will have to get. Technology will have to be in play now. Unlike that time, right? So the technological advancement has changed between 2006 and now. The instrument that will be loose, you cannot be bought for maybe 1,000 naira. It's going to cost money. The money of even the cost of training the people that will even use that. So if I'm going to be an ad hoc staff, for instance, travel to maybe the state capital to do series of trainings, for me, there will surely be also incentives for those people that are also coming, because they will go through under the sun, working, to just ensure that we get this done. But where there is a will, and that's why we talk about political will. So because the difference between leaders also is that somebody must have the courage to do it. Right? So it's not just about promising to do it or saying you will do it. You must have the courage. Your courage is not in the fact that there are not going to be challenges, or that people will likely not challenge what you want to do, but that you have been resolved. You have a resolve that you will get to do it even regardless. Okay, and so and that's why, you know, the Buhari regime wanted to do it before, and they felt like, okay, you know what, because of the cost, let's just, you know, pass it down, you know, as part of our handing over. So let us see. But because we are just we as the president will always say, we have stopped the bleeding. Okay, so we are trying to now enter into another phase. So he believes that by 2025, where they are working with, that by 2025 we should by then, because I mean the IGR from FIRS, based on their data, that as of September, the money, the amount they forecasted that they want to get for this year 2024, as at November, I mean as at last month now, they already met the target. So that is to say, there will be ways by which we can fund this thing, and I hope that we can just get it done, because we must look at the
ultimate good,
that will come out of it, because it's going to be, the ripple effect will be very amazing, you know, across sectors, across boards.
Well, I'm tempted to actually ask about accountability, and you know, because I think Nigeria has a bad track record when it comes to accountability and maintenance. But before we get there, first, how do you think the government can actually ensure that marginalized areas can actually be included, you know, critically in this census?
Okay, so I think that we should put that to NPC, okay, because one of the things that I think they can do, okay, is that's the place of the mapping, and that's the aspect of the mapping, because I think that's even the first or second step in that is the mapping, the community mapping. All right, so they need to be very, we need to be very transparent, all right, in that regard, all right, because people migration has happened. I mean, so there are certain communities that may likely not know that people are even staying there. So we need, and that's why they need to integrate people of that community, because the people that I think can carry out this work are people that even understand the terrain of that particular region. So somebody who wants to do population census of Ondo West now, some people who have been here, they know Ondo West, are people that I think we must engage to do this 1 year. Unlike, so when we do that, we'll be able to say that we will cover more grounds. It will even ease us the problem of some people said they were not counted, because the people have they have done the mapping, okay, to see that this is the region you want to cover, whether it is ward by ward, whether it is local government, regardless of any approach that they want to use, that must be transparent enough to see that people in marginalized communities, when you do what marginalized, that is low-income communities now, all right, must be carried along. And I think it is also going to be important that they work with all relevant stakeholders, because every community have a head, right? The obas, the local obas, the ballets, they also must be involved. They are also stakeholders. That, because now we are talking about it's community now. It's not going to be in schools, so it's going to go into community. So we must also engage relevant stakeholders in this process, so that we can have a very robust, transparent, and also very effective census program.
So I was about asking questions about the involving local governments, involving, you know, local authorities in this kind of things, because I believe Nigeria is a federal state to a very large extent. Though it was still recently, this particular administration, though started from Buhari's administration, talking about the place of ensuring that there are more autonomous local government personalities in each state, so that at least governments can get to the grassroots. Because you made a viable statement there. You talked about the fact that there are some areas in this country where, unless you know the terrain, you can't get there. It's the same issues we had with security, we are still having with security, because since the police force, majorly sometimes even the transfers, you transfer people that don't actually know the terrain into those communities.
It's really battered the Amotekun.
That's what impacted the Amotekun. Because my fear is even going down to states like that are affected by issues of a bit of terrorism, both in the south and in the north. We understand that there are some places that are involved with insecurities, slight terrorisms and all that as we speak. How do you think it's best to even get to them when, even currently, though we are having some states with elections of local governments, they are just getting new into their offices and all that? Do you think it's something that by 2025 there could be a bit of X practice? What about partnering with other NGOs to ensure this is possible?
Okay, so I think for NPC, we have to be the one to coordinate this project. So when I talk about the stakeholders engagement, it's more like it's not that maybe NGOs will help them in getting these things done, but what NGOs do is that NGOs try to be like the watchdog. They play the watchdog role to ensure that they adhere to that particular guideline that coordinates NPC. All right. So what national rulers do is to ensure that first to ensure that the mapping is done, because they can say, okay, this region, this to this region, and also I think it will also help the community engagement now also help to, so that when the staffs or let me say the ad hoc staffs now, for instance, they know where the hot regions are, maybe the gray areas, the regions where they feel like is security, that's a security challenge. All right, so they are able to also protect the lives of those that will even be working. And that's why I'm talking about the engagement of those people, because if they are engaged, if I don't get to a community now, I must meet the Oba. The Oba can say, from this region, when you get to that particular tree, from that place, there may likely be anything that happens on your lower, that kind of thing. So it is important that we also carry them all along. Okay, so the NGOs are going to they are going to be very involved. The civic societies, they'll be involved to ensure that this is done, seamlessly. And also, I think for the place of accountability that you said earlier, is that we individuals also can also play that role. All right, so follow the money. I know there's an organization, follow the money. So they try to also track spending, right, to ensure that, okay, was it really done? Was the money spent for what it was meant to do? But importantly is that those stakeholders all must be involved. Security agencies are also key. They must be involved in trying to say that, because the lives of those people also are very important.
Well, still regarding this issue of accountability, I'll bring it now down to the part of technology. Earlier, like I stated, Nigeria has a bad track record of balancing and accounting for implementations and so many other policies and all whatnot. Meanwhile, this particular segment we're talking about Census, which is keeping data and information of all the people, the citizens of the country. And we definitely are going to be using technology at this stage. We know very well that we are a struggling country trying to adopt one or two and all of that. And we also made a very important fact that Nigeria is struggling with finance and, getting the economy back to track and all of that. How would they be able to actually sustain and maintain these technologies which are supposed to save this information and data as time goes on?
Okay, so I think in your question, I saw there's a path that links with the Nigerian data protection, all right, such that because I think the chairman already made reference to that, because these are some of the things we also must put in place, or let me say look into. The place of confidentiality is very important. I mean, these are issues that we must look into. The issue of consent is very important. So at what point can somebody get my data and use my data at one point? So those things also must be very important. They are very important. So data must be, I mean, the Nigerian Data Protection Act, the act already provides a framework, all right, around protecting data subjects. So whether it is this kind of data, all right, it's still going to we can still also infer and say, but and that is very important. The legal framework is very important, and I think that the provision of that act already gives a very, very clear perspective as to what. So NPC are going to know that they are going to be regulated. So they cannot just say because you have data with you, then the data can just be used anyhow. All right. So and that's why that's why I talk about the civic societies. And so there are civic societies that have to look into that aspect to see that the rights of people are not violated because of data. All right. So and especially with respect to technology usage now. Although the Data Protection Act might likely not have specified technology, all right, in any possible way, but then it could be integrated to see that any way by which you're able to gather the data, but any means you have used, all right, it's just like you getting a questionnaire, whether it is physically or whether it is using Kobo Collect, which is an app, regardless of whatever mode, the legal framework is still certain to say that the data that is given to you is to be confidential. All right. So, and there are provisions of the law that guarantees at what point can that information be released. Okay. So, I don't want us to go into legal issues now, but there are provisions already, which is very clear, and they must adhere to that. It's very important, and I think it's one of the things that the chairman even made reference to, the issue of confidentiality, so that people don't then tend to use some of those things, to witch hunt people, to destroy somebody's life. Very important.
Okay, let me just ask a very direct question here. Do you think at the end of the census, that's if it ever happens, do you think we can get an actual figure of, in all genuinity, of the amount of people or the number of people we have living in the country as we speak?
It's going to be a long journey, but I want to believe strongly that we should be able. We are not as populated as India. We are not as populated as China. So if they could do it,
having in mind that actually, just like Joshua stated earlier, there are places that are plagued with insecurity.
Yes, interestingly,
and they are marginalized.
Interestingly, those
so
regions,
penetrating those regions.
Because for me, I have a bit of issue with. Okay. Should they even be counted? Some people who have been trying to, they are attacking, people, should they be counted? Are they still citizens? Because that's another issue. The issue of security now. But then, I think that it's something that must be done, could be done, should be done, and I think the NPC, God grant them grace, okay, and the necessary equipment that they need, whatever resources needed, but it is something that they must. It's just important for us as a country. I know it's important. The reason why I actually asked the question, which I think at the end of the day, answering it will going to be after we go on a short break, actually. Okay. But the reason why I decided to ask the question is because of one, historical backgrounds. We had the census in the 1960s, and we could not get an actual true figure because of the fact that allocations were to be shared according to regions, according to population, and that mentality is still there with people. Aside from that, in 2006, when we had the population counts, there were some places where some of the staffs went to, and they could not permit them to go in. There are some places, especially in the north, where you get there and they'll be like, I've forgotten the sign they used particularly. Don't enter into this place because of the fact that I have wives that are there. So if you want to count, you either just count by maybe an head count or count by feet and all that. So can we actually get an actual figure? Exactly. Those are the challenges that might likely still happen. And I'm very sure that they should emphasize this. And if you look at the issue of the tax reform bills, and there's certain people from the north are trying, because they believe strongly that should be the modus operandi of dividing the whole, should still be by population. But where we are going to now, you don't need to tell lie about your population, because there is nothing like population again at the end of the day. Because the reform bill is trying to also give different perspective as regards the way we can even divide it. So if you think that your area of strength is now population, and that was what was that, because based on the calculation as I did last time, all right, so we could say, because it's population, so Kano have to stick to the fact that we are the most populous, so that by that we can get more money. But where we are going to is that it's not going to be like that. The derivation, the calculation. I think I even listened to the news this morning that based on what the federal government said, it's going to be their own percentage, and what we go to the state. But what goes to the state, also the issue of the VAT is where they are even having debates. Yeah, both generation and exactly. So that at what point? Because if a region, if the VAT I got from you is 610 million, but at the end of the day, when we divide the money, you are getting about 7 billion. So then what happens to somebody who gives us more money, but the person gets less? And that is why there's a need for us to really do that holistic change as regards this tax reform. And that's why I support it, because it's also going to also help us, all right, in respect to this allocation of resources. Because that's what we are talking about. Yeah, that's what we're talking about, and we'll still keep talking about it immediately after we go on this very short break. Please do enjoy this. We'll be back soon. Welcome back to the show. If you just joined us, it's still Daybreak Africa, and we are discussing about the national population census, the data and drive towards economic
economic prosperity, economic development. And our public affairs analyst has been with us in the studio discussing a lot on this in the person of Mr. Kehinde Emmanuel. I remember before we went on the short break, I communicated some fears to you, looking at the fact that historically, due to revenue allocation, some of the figures were manipulated, and the fact that again, we have some religious and cultural issues attached to it as well, in the sense that you could go to some places and because of their religious belief, you can't count them due to, I made an example of a northern place where one of the staffs then made an example of you can't enter into those places, you can only stand on the outside and just count, because of the fact that according to their culture and tradition there, you can't enter into the rooms where the women are. And you can never know, you might have more numbers of people there than your head counts. Head counts sometimes cannot just be the best way. So, and we're asking how it could happen. And you are making giving us an analogy of the tax reform bill, which you're talking about the generation and the distribution, looking at the fact that even your population might not totally be an anathema for how we can, share these resources to you and all that. But now, looking at it from your perspective, do you think, sorry, I'm delving a bit into the tax reform bills, because these reform bills are still issues that at the end of the day might still affect even the outcome of the census if it gets counted. Do you think any changes can be made to it that will still, make us still look further into populations in the country?
Okay, if I'm very clear now, as regards the reform bill.
The reform bill, yeah.
Okay, so I think the reform bill is fantastic. I've gone through that document. Even though I want to go and read again, but I think to a degree, and I've been able to also listen to certain economic experts. I've listened to Taiwo, Oyedele now.
Yeah,
I've listened to
Zach
also, right? And I've been able to also understand what they are talking about. So I know the fears of the northerners. Northern governors. They have their fears, and their fears is also legit. All right, but then if we really want to towards a prosperous nation, and if we want also that the state governors also know that there's more work to be done, instead of them just the barbarians have to stop, we need to get to really work. Okay, and that's where we are going into. So it is very instrumental, because all these things, we are talking about revenue. So if we get the revenue, we need to talk about the allocation of resources to where and to where. So when we have this one census, helps us to identify those areas that we need to really cover up for. So if we need to do something on vocational training for the let me say the alimanjuries, as a quote and unquote now, we know how that money has to go. We know the number of people we are covering for. We know the number of artisans we want to, But now, because of the role of technology that I want to put into this particular project, you might likely not necessarily have to say someone is inside, because it might even require your fingerprint. So that is, if the person did not come out, the person cannot be counted as a person that is even, as a Nigerian. So you have to say the person, at least the person has to come out now and put fingerprint. So whatever numbers they are, they might have to also put their fingerprint. So technology will also help us too, and that's what of the road that technology did in INEC. Right? We have times when, although there are gaps, there are like shortcomings, right, but then it has helped us to also reduce the number of people just anyhowness voting. Okay, that has happened in the past. So because now you have a card, it scans your face, then you proceed to vote. But unlike before, there was nothing like that. There was nothing like that. You just go there.
Just go there and just use manual.
So manual. So because of that manual, that has affected the whole number. So and that's why tomorrow. How do we get to 230-something million people? It's more like speculation too. That they feel like, okay, I think we have increased. Do we have a data for our birth rate? Do we have a data for death rate? Do we even have any data as regards the number of child that is born in a day, or that is born in the for the whole year? Can we say that we have 110 whatever? So this data, that's why I said the importance of it is that it's going to also help the health sector, because you can also have informed decision, morbidity, the number of children that were born in the year, the relevant hospitals management, they also have role to play right, with this same data. So it helps us. Integration of tech in this aspect will be very, very. I just hope that it works out anyway. And I hope that the government also, on their own part, will be committed to saying that the allocation of resources also thereafter. Also, that we don't politicize all those things, and we also, stay on course.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask a follow-up question regarding the fact that truly before anything like this happen, everybody has to come together to make it successful. Knowing the fact that the government cannot do it themselves, the people also have to avail themselves in order for the census to actually be carried out.
Definitely.
So how do we begin to enlighten people? How do we begin to reach out to those people who have certain beliefs that they are not supposed to step out or this or that?
Especially the religious parts in this part of the world. Religions are opium.
Exactly, and that is where the relevant. When we talk about relevant stakeholders, I mean, I could not really mention everybody, and I'm not sure I can mention everybody. The National Orientation Agency have a responsibility, right? Which is as regards this orientation of people, orientation of people. So they need to work with media outlets. They need to work with newspapers. But although they even work with KAFTAN TV, they should work with all media houses, radio stations, to see that we communicate some of these things. And for you to communicate, let me give you more like we must communicate. Communication is not when we speak and the other person doesn't understand. Communication is that the other party must also have an understanding of what you're saying. So if it's in your own possible language, we must take it down to the grassroots to ensure that this message is communicated. Also, we can also need to, the CAN, PFN, Muslim societies, all these clerics, are also instrumental, because on Sunday, on Friday, they find a way to go and worship. So they also should be carried along. Even at that, traditional institutions are also going to play key role to ensure that they sensitize their people as regards this thing. When they declare holiday for the moon, there's a way the message goes down. Abi? Yeah. The same way, and yet we observe it. The same way we must also engage this, because people really need to know, just like I don't want to divert, but just like the fear that people can have skepticism about anything, but then we need to let them know why it is important, what benefit is attached to it, why as a state our people should be committed to doing this thing, why we should support the government. Some people will not be happy, they might likely be angry and say they will just stay indoor, but why it is important. And that's why I think the National Orientation Agency must level up their game, right, in making sure that people are sensitized.
Talking about leveling up their game is one of the scariest things you just said today, because I know leveling up the game is something that over the years we must just be very factual and sincere to ourselves. That I think this is just my own personal opinion. Like, they really need to step up, because if I'm to rate it, it's as if they don't need to. Looking at the fact that election-wise, anytime I go out for election duties, to go cover elections, the number of registered voters is always way lower than the number of accredited voters. Way lower, extremely lower than. I was in Anambra recently, because I was about even going to the southeastern part of the nation, who is already embattled by calls for secession. And we are talking about the population. Now, according to some of them, they claim they are Biafrans and not Nigerians. And if you look at it, even when you go there for election duties and all that, you discover that not all of them comes out for election duties. You discover that the last Anambra elections, the number of registered voters was way lower. You could raise the power of, or let's say you could times 10 of the accredited voters stayed at home peacefully. So it was as if like 0 points, not 0 points,
make the general decision for them.
20% of the population is making the decision on who the governments are going to be for the 100%. So how do we get people involved is what, like in the southeastern part of Nigeria especially, what do you think is the necessary steps aside from national orientation? Now, don't you think that even the governors of those states, even the leaders of those people, because even the governors right now, I don't think they have as much power as even the callers of the secessionists, like the spearheaders like Nnamdi Kanu. Don't you think right about now is the time when the government should be considering releasing him to ensure that everybody is carried along with this particular move?
Okay, so even though I don't want to delve too much into
I know it's a sensitive matter actually.
the subject of those who calling for secession, right? Because we have to go back in history, then we have to discuss blah 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 blah. But I don't want us to go there. But then I agree with you that the government of those states, should, based on the election output. But if you realize that in the general election, there's a particular candidate that came from their region. The question then is, they came out in mass to vote that person. The question then is, if he had won, would the clamor still have continued? Maybe not. But then to let you know that, as one person always says, we all know what we are doing. So what I'm trying to say is that the whole agitation, I feel also stems from a particular need for a particular demand. But the clamor for that you want to leave, all right, is a grave offense in itself. Okay, but then there's a need for governors maybe to call maybe like a confab or place of to discuss, for them to hear their opinions, and see how they can douse the tension, because now that it's resulting to attacks on people, I think that is what we need to also checkmate. So government should really do much as regards that. But as I've said earlier, National Orientation Agency, I must say that so far over time they have not really done anything, as it were. So it's not out of place to say they have not done well. Okay, but then, and that's why we cannot limit it to them alone. Alright, so it must be a call, and that's why I think even our the celebrities, even the public figures, because people spend more time on TikToks, people do Instagram. So there's a need for us to also engage all these platforms to see that we communicate these things. I know also that maybe because of certain people, because of their candidates that lost, so some people are just feel like, whatever happens to this country just happens. Yeah. But I think we need to take our minds away from that. I mean, the person who lost and who won, whether you lose or win, it is still the country, it is our country, it is still Nigeria, all right? It is still our country, the country is ours, all right? So we should all come together on the strength of our oneness, all right, and see that we move this country forward. So one of the things, or one of the ways by which we can do that, is also to see that we also work together with the relevant stakeholders who will be involved in this process to see that we get the necessary data. The data, and that's why I talk about the importance of it. So that's why the religious clerics, the governors must play their key role. Whatever ministry are going to be involved in their own respective states should go all out in sensitizing their people.
Should go all out.
Well, from your perspective, which sector, or let me say sector, which sector do you think is going to benefit more from this census?
For me, I think of two major sectors. One is health, number two is education.
Okay.
That's for me. If there's another one apart from that, will likely be maybe, let me talk about maybe social welfare aspect, social welfare related issues. You want to social welfare interventions, maybe that could also help. But because you want to maybe artisans, you want to do, but I strongly, it will also help us. Our health sector is going to help us in our education. Evidence-based, because that's the major. It's also going to also help policymakers. It's going to also help policymakers to make informed decision that is not based on what they think, but what it is.
Okay. What role do you also think it can play in getting investors down to the country to help our economy grow faster?
Okay. Yeah. So it's going to be instrumental, because it is not the numbers that counts. As it were, for investors. Investors are not talking about it. It is the viability of the economy. Okay, it's the viability of it. So we will they have to keep doing that. But then, when you make informed decision based on evidence, and you come up with a policy framework, or a policy framework that, or maybe an idea that investors could come in and they can key into, whether it is respect to health, whether it's respect to education, they also know that it is backed up by data. That is, we are solving a problem that we know that it's there, and this is the solution to it. Then they can trust that there's a place of predictability. So investors can say they're not. It's not working based on. They're trying to use their head or idea, but there is predictability, and that it will also give investors confidence. All right, in trying to also invest in our country.
I also give them confidence. I even like the fact that you chipped in the place of that social intervention. Program will also be affected, the sector itself, social welfare and all those kind of things, because I remember many Nigerians came out on social media. I think that was about a month ago, when the federal government said some households of the poorest got over some cash transfer as an ease to the current economic hardships and all that. And many Nigerians came out that if you collected money, please just come out there and talk about it. We still experience what's late last year. What happened late last year, early this year, what happened with the minister of, the minister in charge of that, in the person of Betta Edu, where she was alleged to have, coined out some money for herself, and all those kind of things and all. And then she made her own claims, in all honesty, that these were the programs I did it for and all that. Now, do you think controversies attached to those kind of social intervention programs can end totally with proper data and especially traceable data in those aspects?
I think it will surely help us, because based on what you said, even though when you talk about the poorest of the poor are not on Twitter. That's on X. The poorest of the poor might likely not even be using social media at all. There might not be any. Okay, so when I saw that and said they should come and snap it and send to them, I don't know whether maybe our definition of the poorest of the poor is quite different, because it's not just poor. The person is not poor.
Poorest of the poor.
They are saying that this is the poorest of the poor. I have been to Benue State. Okay, I've served there. So when you talk about maybe poorest of the poor, and you go to maybe Jigawa, Sokoto, and you go to some areas where it's just this torchlight phone that they are using. They only listen to radio. Okay, so and they get this money. They don't know how to come and tell you and say they got the money. But you must also know that even in this part of the country, certain people who are also working class also got the same money. Okay, because one way or the other, somebody was able to chip in their contacts. All right, and that is why I feel like that data is necessary, because it goes down to meet those people. The details, their data is it's not that maybe you said somebody should send it to them. They get it from the person itself. So when they want to do anything, they know how the data is. They use the data, as it were, and they able to send down some of those things to those people. So those people get it directly. Right. So for instance, I don't know the question they will likely be asking on there, but you talk about the salary, maybe how much you earn per month, because when you look at that, it helps us to even know how poor are we poor as a country. Okay, so looking at the tax reform was saying that the people who are earning $1 million per annum now will be exempted, because $1 million per annum, what that suggests was that divided by 12. So how much is the person even taking home?
You might not even taking up to 100,000 home.
So that those kind of people should be. So anybody below that, there are some people that they only earn maybe 35,000, 35 times 12. So those people should be exempted. And when you see some of those people, the poorest of the poor are the people that if you even give them a 10,000 naira for their biscuits, for their worobo that they are selling, Yoruba, quote unquote worobo, they feel elated. And I think also that it's going to help government to try to meet with the people at the doorstep of their house. It brings government directly to them, and that's why all these reforms are all interconnected. Whether it is local government autonomy, whether it is tax aspect, whether it is this one, they are all connected. And I think it's important that we get this done with.
Well, I think what Joshua said about the former minister who was allegedly accused of siphoning money boils down to corruption in leadership system in Nigeria. It has eaten deep into Nigeria's system, and it is causing a huge problem for us.
Yes, it is.
When we talk about allocation of funds and all of that, and how it's being shared actually to where they are supposed to be is another issue. So where do we begin to bring back integrity to government?
And the people who in charge with the integrity should do their work. The FCC. The FCC should do their work. Well, look at the administration has been. I think 2 days ago, Yahya Bello,
after months of being hidden by his successor.
To let you know that a country cannot just be built just by one man. If the former governor or the current governor, had to be the one to whisk away the former governor, you have to go and hide him somewhere. That's what the news said. To let you know that there should be a penalty for even somebody like that, because being a party to that kind of thing is more like a treasonable offense. Okay, but let the person present himself. So the EFCC, the Code of Conduct Bureau, and all those relevant they are the tools already in place. They are government system to see that they can fight this thing, and they should even do their work. They should, because that's the only way. And I think that's why you consider better they have to take better. And I think peer pressure also did that for Better Edu. On social media, people were pressing some of these things. People were signing
petitions against that.
Okay, to let you know that the time that we have now is not the time where people can only just do anyhow honest to. The prayer period, the youthful population, vibrant one, as PBAT always say, are also committed to seeing that they also play checks and balances for the people in power.
Well, as we round off gradually, I want to just ask you for your own personal predictions. If the 2025 census occurs in this country and all those kind of things, what do you see happening in the country the next 2-3 years from there actually?
Okay, I'm very positive that the data subjects, all right, would help government to make more better informed decisions, which I believe also will also the effect will be across sectors. And I think that whatever the renewed hope idea or initiatives, all right, it will be able to bring catalyst. I mean, let me say the data will help them to catalyze that particular agenda. So whatever I want to do, we're able to work with data and we're able to work with predictability. So it's going to help the administration, maybe before 2031, you know, able to get many things, they cover more grounds, you know, they cover more grounds, they cover, the impact is more reaching, all right? So I believe strongly that it should be very, very good one for us, I mean, at the end of the day.
Well, still on corruption, because what you said now will still boil down to the fact that the government would have to be true about their decision-making and, implementation process. However, when it comes to corruption, again, I still repeat that we need to look into it more critically. Now, over time, people have brought up their ideas that probably if Nigerian constitution can be properly looked into, probably done away with and rebuilt or reformed all over again. Do you think this is the best decision for Nigeria government?
The subject of the constitution. It's a debate that has happened. I mean, that is going on.
It has always been going on. Yeah.
Okay. So and the process legally, the process of trying to say you want to do more like that, constitutional reforms. Right, the process of doing that is going to also take longer time. I mean, the time, the energy consumed. Right, but instead of that, there's certain executive orders that are in place to see that some of those things are re-engineered. So instead of we trying to say, "Want to just fling it out," because to start again is even, it's going to be very difficult. Some have the opinion that maybe we should go back to 1979. All right, but if for this course, the 2014 confab. Yeah. All right. So the reports of that confab, some of the things, some of their recommendations is some of the things that we're already doing now. Yeah. Right. That they're trying to also do now. So if we can do it to the later, but it's not always easy to make some of the decisions, because those decisions are also going to be very tough. That the fact that somebody recommend and said this, the time you want to take that action, you may likely see a section of the country trying to pressure you to say no. Don't do it. And then anybody could be used to push a particular narrative, to say no. They can even be signing petition also on the matter. Right? So, and that's the dynamics of being humans. Being human is that it's not a one-way thing. The fact that you think that this is it, other people can actually also have different opinion as regards it. But then, what the government is doing now with respect to some of those executives are also tools to doing that. The legislative, using the Supreme Court to also make certain judgments, yeah, right, on some of those, because the role of the court is to really interpret in perspective what the law is saying. Not that we assume now, but it gives the whatever guesses that we already have, whatever interpretation, they bring it to context, and they solidify and say this is what the law is saying. And once we do that, then we move from there. Because once we cannot tell the Supreme Court to come back again to say this is what it does. I mean, there's no appeal after the Supreme judgment, and that's one of the role that this government is doing to ensure that these reforms must be done, and it's based on those recommendations too, that confirmed recommendation, and I think we just have to follow through.
But do you think it's ever possible that we'll stick to the 10 years arrangements to ensure that a census always occurs in this country?
I don't know whether this administration will do it, but we have never done it. The last one should be do it. 10 years after 2006, should have been 2016, and this is 2024.
Even so, the one before 2006 was still way behind here.
Okay, so if we do that, if we say 2006, we move 2025. After 2025, the next one should be when? 2035. So the question then is, who will likely be the president at that time? what will likely have happened? So there might likely be issues. We don't know. I don't know the next 15 years from now. So I don't know what will likely happen. But sustainability is very important. So if we have a thriving economy, if the reforms are in place, and that's what we are trying to do. What they are trying to do. Let me say what they are trying to do. With respect to this administration, is that, and that's why it's quite a bit, painful, because it's more like you are trying to somebody who has been used to lying down for 30 years, and you say you want you to work for the first time in 30 years. Is something that will take time. The person will likely feel the pain, but then there is already a goal ahead. You want the person to work. So we are what they are doing now currently. Although my challenge is that it is quite slow. I must admit that it's quite slow.
Thank God you admitted to the fact that it's quite slow. Yeah.
All right. So the slow pace at which they are going is what is making, and that's what I'm not too cool with. All right. But they are not necessarily bad as it is. So because if you look at the outlooks and reports, they say, oh, you guys are doing, but the reform is going on. But then the response to ameliorating the effect is not really getting down. And as such, the lamentations will keep going on. All right. But when you keep saying, bear with us, it gets to a point. The goat that you think is your friend will have to even attack you when it gets to the war. Okay, so, and we don't want, I'm not going to want them to take us to that point. All right, because economists say, fantastic reform. France will say this, Bloomberg will say this. We look at quarter three reports, like fantastic. That could be the outlook. But then the people,
actual realities of the people,
the reality of the people,
the lamentations of the Nigerian people, actually.
Right? So because it is slow, and I think government need to fix that.
I think that's one you said in the last place is what really concerns me the most. Government needs to fix that, because the lamentations itself is quite high at this particular time. I was still complaining to Angela that 110,000 for a bag of rice as we speak.
No, I'm not saying that the bag of rice will drop down to.
no, what scares me the most is we get into December. We are in December already.
The purchasing power of the people
is very low.
So we can have a better economy, and then the bag of rice is 150, and yet the purchasing power is very high. The credit-driven economy that they are talking work on we need to intensify. It's just too slow. Those things they are good, but they are too slow, because it's not, the CNG on one side. Those things are good, okay, but it's too slow, and as such, it's giving people this idea that it's like they are not taking us seriously. Okay, and they are also legit within their right to say that. Okay, yeah, people are legit to say that.
Yeah,
whether they voted for you or not, right? You owe them a responsibility, to do. And I think the President Tinubu administration should look into that.
Thanks so much, sir, for this particular discussions. I think I really enjoyed it, as well as our viewers and all that, and I must be very sincere with you. It's something that I really, really look forward to, the census especially, and everything, like you predicted, is going to impact on our economy as time goes by. But then, it's left to see, and we leave our fingers crossed, like we always say. We all know what we're doing, actually. Thanks so much, Mr. Kehinde, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. But then, we have to close the show until we meet next day. Tomorrow it's on Tuesday. Till then, my name is Ikhonede Joshua Odeji.
And I am Angela Daku. Have a pleasant night day.